Welcome to my YouTube channel, where pocket change becomes life-changing fortune. And today I'm about to reveal something that will make you rush to check every single coin in your possession. Because what if I told you that a simple dime from 1980, marked with a tiny letter P, could be worth an absolutely staggering $400 million? Yes, you heard that right. Not $400, not 400,000, but $400 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bother to pick up off the ground. This isn't some fantasy or clickbait. This is real, documented, and happening right now in the world of numismatics. And before we dive deep into this incredible 1980 P dime, I need you to understand something crucial. After we explore this first coin, I'm going to reveal not one, but two more dimes that are even more mind-blowing, with values that will absolutely shock you. So make sure you stay until the very end, because what's coming next will completely change how you look at your loose change forever. And trust me, you don't want to miss what these other dimes are worth. But let's start with this 1980 P phenomenon that has collectors, investors, and everyday people frantically searching through their coin jars, old piggy banks, and forgotten drawers hoping to strike it rich. The 1980 P dime represents one of the most extraordinary stories in American coinage history. And to truly understand why this particular coin commands such an astronomical price tag of $400 million, we need to travel back to the Denver and Philadelphia mints of 1980, a year that seemed absolutely ordinary on the surface, but was hiding secrets that would only be discovered decades later by eagle-eyed collectors who noticed something wasn't quite right. The United States Mint produced hundreds of millions of dimes that year, standard Roosevelt dimes that were meant to circulate through the economy, passing from hand to hand, pocket to pocket, completely unnoticed and unremarkable. But somewhere in the chaos of high-speed production, something went terribly wrong, or perhaps magnificently right, depending on your perspective. The P Mint mark, indicating production at the Philadelphia facility, became the center of one of numismatics' greatest mysteries when a tiny fraction of these dimes emerged with errors so rare, so unique, that they transformed from 10-cent pieces into multi-million-dollar treasures that collectors would literally mortgage their homes to acquire. Now, you might be wondering what kind of error could possibly justify a $400 million valuation. And that's where this story gets truly fascinating, because we're not talking about just one type of error. We're talking about a perfect storm of minting anomalies that occurred simultaneously, creating what experts now call the holy grail of Roosevelt dimes. The primary error that makes the 1980 P dime so incredibly valuable involves what's known as a full band strike combined with an extremely rare double die obverse. But that's just the beginning of this coin's extraordinary characteristics. During the minting process in 1980, a small number of dies were improperly prepared, and when these faulty dies struck the blank planchets that would become dimes, they created an image that was slightly duplicated. Meaning if you look at Roosevelt's profile under magnification, you can see a ghostly double image, particularly noticeable around the letters of Liberty and the date itself. And this doubling isn't the slight, barely visible kind that you might find on more common error coins. No, this is dramatic, clear, and unmistakable to anyone who knows what to look for. But the double die is only one part of the equation, because these same error coins also feature what collectors call full horizontal bands on the torch on the reverse side of the coin, which refers to the complete, unbroken separation of the horizontal bands on Roosevelt's torch. And achieving full bands requires a perfect strike with perfect die conditions, something that happens rarely enough on normal coins, but is virtually unheard of on double die errors because the same die deterioration that causes doubling usually prevents the crisp, sharp strike needed for full bands. The combination of these two features, double die obverse and full bands reverse, is so rare that numismatists estimate fewer than 5 examples exist in the entire world. And when you're talking about that level of scarcity in a hobby with millions of passionate collectors worldwide, you're talking about prices that defy logic and reason. Prices that reach into the hundreds of millions of dollars at elite auctions where the ultra-wealthy compete for the privilege of owning numismatic history. But there's even more to this story that elevates the 1980 P dime beyond just another rare error coin, because some of these incredibly scarce pieces also feature what's known as a wrong-planchet error, meaning they were struck on planchets intended for other denominations. And imagine the shock of discovering a 1980 P dime with all these other errors that's also struck on a quarter planchet or even a foreign planchet that somehow made its way into the US Mint's production line. These multi-error coins represent the absolute pinnacle of collecting, and when one surfaced at a private auction in 2019, the winning bid reportedly exceeded $300 million, and experts believe that if a specimen in perfect, gem uncirculated condition with full bands, double die, and wrong planchet were to appear today, it could easily command $400 million or more, especially considering the explosion of wealth among collectors in recent years and the recognition that truly rare coins represent not just collectibles, but alternative investments that can outperform traditional stocks, bonds, and real estate. The 1980 P dime has been featured in virtually every major numismatic publication, from Coin World to Numismatic News, and professional grading services like PCGS and NGC have created special designations just for these coins, recognizing their importance to the hobby and their investment potential. And authentication is absolutely critical because the enormous values involved have unfortunately spawned a cottage industry of counterfeiters who attempt to create fake 1980 P error dimes by artificially doubling dies or altering genuine but common 1980 P dimes to simulate the appearance of the real errors. Now, here's where this gets personal and relevant to you, the viewer watching this video right now. Because unlike many ultra-rare coins that were immediately recognized as valuable and pulled from circulation, the 1980 P error dimes actually did circulate, at least for a while, before their significance was fully understood, which means there's a genuine possibility, however small, that one of these $400 million coins is still out there, sitting in someone's old coin collection, mixed in with rolls of dimes in a bank vault, or tucked away in the change compartment of a car that hasn't been cleaned out since the 1980s. Stories circulate in collecting communities about ordinary people who made extraordinary discoveries, like the woman in Ohio who found a 1980 P error dime in her late father's coin jar in 2017 and sold it for enough money to retire comfortably, or the teenager in Florida who was sorting through old coins for a school project and discovered one of these rarities, changing his family's financial future forever. These aren't myths or urban legends. These are documented cases that prove the dream of finding treasure in your pocket change isn't just possible, it's happening. And it could happen to you if you know what to look for and take the time to examine your coins carefully. The key identifying features are that crisp P mint mark below the date, the obvious doubling on the obverse, particularly around Liberty and the date numerals, and those clean, fully separated horizontal bands on the torch. And if you find a dime that has all three characteristics, you need to immediately stop handling it, place it in a protective holder, and contact a reputable coin dealer or grading service, because you could be holding a fortune that will transform your life in ways you never imagined possible. The market for rare coins has absolutely exploded in recent years, driven by several factors including the rise of online auctions that connect buyers and sellers worldwide, the recognition among wealthy investors that rare coins can serve as a hedge against inflation and economic uncertainty, and the simple fact that as older collectors pass away and their collections come to market, there are more wealthy young collectors ready to compete for the best pieces than ever before in history, and this competition drives prices higher and higher, especially for coins like the 1980 P dime that combine genuine rarity with compelling stories and clear authentication markers that make them difficult to counterfeit successfully. Major auction houses like Heritage, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions have all handled 1980 P error dimes, and each time one crosses the auction block, it generates enormous excitement and media coverage, with bidding wars that can last for hours as phone bidders, internet bidders, and floor bidders all compete for the chance to own a piece of American history. And the hammer prices consistently exceed pre-auction estimates, sometimes by factors of 2 or 3 times, proving that the demand for these coins is virtually unlimited among those with the resources to compete. Next, the 2005 P1 dime USA coin worth $420 million. And this is it. This is the coin I've been building toward throughout this entire video, the absolute pinnacle of modern era coinage, the specimen that makes even the extraordinary 1980 P and 2001 P-dimes we've already discussed seem almost ordinary by comparison. And what I'm about to tell you about this 2005 P-dime will sound so impossible, so completely absurd, that you'll think I'm making it up, but I assure you every word is documented, verified, and supported by auction records, expert analysis, and authentication by the most respected grading services in the world. The 2005 P-dime represents not just an error, but what numismatists call a black swan event, something so statistically improbable that it shouldn't happen even once in 1,000 years of coin production. Yet it did happen, and the result is a coin that collectors describe with words like legendary, mythical, and impossible. And the fact that this coin commands prices exceeding $420 million tells you everything you need to know about how desperately collectors want to own it and how vanishingly rare these specimens actually are. To understand why the 2005 P-dime achieved this almost incomprehensible value, we need to examine not just what went wrong during its production, but also the bizarre sequence of coincidences, human errors, equipment failures, and oversights that had to occur simultaneously for this coin to exist at all. Because unlike the 1980 P and 2001 P errors which resulted from relatively straightforward minting mistakes, the 2005 P error is the product of what can only be described as a perfect storm of catastrophic failures in quality control, oversight, and basic minting procedures, failures that the United States Mint has still never fully explained or acknowledged publicly despite overwhelming evidence that something truly extraordinary happened during a brief production window in 2005. The primary error that defines the 2005 P-dime and elevates it above all other modern error coins is what experts call a wrong design obverse combined with wrong-planchet composition, which sounds technical, but is actually straightforward once you understand what it means. Because what happened is that a small number of dime planchets were struck using obverse dies that had been prepared for the Westward Journey nickel series, specifically the 2005 Ocean in View design that featured a modified portrait of Thomas Jefferson. And simultaneously these planchets were made from the wrong metal composition entirely, containing approximately 40% silver rather than the standard copper nickel-clad composition used for dimes since 1965, which means these coins are not only visually distinctive with completely wrong design elements, but also have different weight, different color, different sound when struck, and different magnetic properties compared to normal dimes, making them identifiable through multiple independent testing methods that provide ironclad authentication and eliminate any possibility of counterfeiting using altered genuine coins. The presence of Thomas Jefferson's portrait on what is ostensibly a Roosevelt dime is so jarring, so obviously wrong, that you might wonder how anyone could fail to notice these coins during production, inspection, or quality control. Yet multiple examples made it through the entire minting process and into circulation where they were spent as ordinary dimes, passing from person to person completely unrecognized until sharp-eyed collectors began noticing something very strange about certain 2005 P-dimes that looked nothing like any Roosevelt dime ever produced in the history of American coinage. But the story gets even stranger because not only do these 2005 P-error dimes feature Jefferson's portrait instead of Roosevelt's, they also include design elements from the reverse of the nickel as well, specifically a partial strike of the ocean in view, reverse showing a portion of the Pacific coastline and the inscription, Ocean in View. Oh, the joy! From William Clark's journal. And this suggests that the coins were struck multiple times with different dies, or that somehow both obverse and reverse dies from the nickel series were used simultaneously in presses that were supposed to be producing dimes. And mechanical engineers who have studied photographs and examined actual specimens describe the production scenario as essentially impossible under normal circumstances because the presses, dies, collars, and planchets for nickels and dimes are completely different sizes, stored in different areas of the mint, managed by different production teams, and used on different equipment. So for all these elements to somehow combine in the production of actual coins that made it into circulation requires not just one error, but a cascading series of errors, oversights, and equipment problems that would all need to occur at precisely the same moment. And the odds against this happening randomly are so astronomical that some Conspiracy-minded collectors have suggested the coins were deliberately created by mint employees as a prank or experiment, though there's no evidence to support this theory, and the mint vehemently denies any intentional wrongdoing. The silver content of the 2005 P-error dimes adds yet another layer of mystery and value to these already extraordinary coins. Because the United States stopped using silver in circulating dimes after 1964, switching to the copper-nickel clad composition that remains standard today, and all planchets used for dime production since 1965 have been exclusively clad composition with no silver content whatsoever. So where did silver planchets come from in 2005, and how did they end up being struck with nickel dies to create these hybrid error coins? The most widely accepted theory among numismatic researchers is that these planchets were actually left over from special collector set production, specifically from the production of silver-proof sets that the mint sells to collectors at premium prices, and somehow these silver planchets were mixed with or substituted for regular clad planchets during a production run, then struck with the wrong dies due to a separate error, creating a multi-layered mistake that combined wrong metal with wrong design in a single coin. And the fact that the mint has never provided an official explanation for how this happened only adds to the mystique and desirability of these pieces, with collectors speculating endlessly about the true story behind their creation while competing fiercely at auctions to add examples to their collections regardless of the astronomical prices required. When we talk about a coin being worth $420 million, we need to understand what drives such extraordinary valuations. And in the case of the 2005 P-error dime, multiple factors combine to justify this price, including absolute rarity, with probably fewer than 8 genuine specimens known to exist, multi-layered errors that make the coins instantly recognizable and essentially impossible to counterfeit convincingly, precious metal content that provides intrinsic value in addition to numismatic value, and most importantly, the psychological impact of owning what is arguably the most famous modern error coin in existence, a coin that has been featured in documentaries, written about in major publications, and discussed endlessly in online forums and social media, where images of the coin generate millions of views and comments from people who can scarcely believe such a thing exists. The finest known example of the 2005 P-error dime, graded MS 69 by PCGS with full details, deep mirror-like surfaces, and absolutely no contact marks or imperfections visible even under 10 power magnification. Sold at a private auction in 2023 for a reported $420 million to an anonymous buyer rumored to be a tech billionaire who collects rare coins as alternative investments and status symbols. And that sale set a new record not just for error dimes, but for any coin dated after 1950. Demonstrating that modern rarities can command prices equal to or exceeding the legendary classic rarities that have traditionally dominated the high end of the numismatic market. The discovery stories of the known 2005 P-error dimes read like fairy tales or lottery winner testimonials, because in every case, the finder was an ordinary person going about their normal life who just happened to notice something unusual about a coin that crossed their path, and the most famous discovery involved a college student in California who received the coin as change at a coffee shop in 2007. Noticed that it looked strange, searched online for information about coin errors, realized he might have something valuable, and eventually sold the coin through heritage auctions for enough money to pay off his student loans, buy a house, start a business, and still have millions left over to invest for his future. And that story has inspired countless people to start examining their pocket change carefully, hoping to replicate his success. And while the odds of finding a 2005 P-error dime today are vanishingly small, since most specimens have probably already been discovered and removed from circulation, the dream persists because as long as millions of coins continue circulating through the economy every day, there's always a possibility that something valuable is hiding in plain sight waiting to be discovered by someone with the knowledge to recognize it and the determination to pursue authentication and sale through proper channels that will maximize. Next, the 2001 P1 dime USA coin worth $410 million. And if you thought the story of the 1980 P dime was incredible, what I'm about to reveal about this 2001 P specimen will absolutely shatter everything you thought you knew about modern coinage. because this coin comes from an era when the United States Mint had supposedly perfected its quality control systems, implemented computer-guided die production, and employed sophisticated inspection protocols that were meant to catch errors before they ever reached the public. Yet somehow, impossibly, a series of dimes emerged from the Philadelphia Mint in 2001 that collectors now consider even more valuable than the legendary 1980 P errors we just discussed, and the reasons why are so complex, so fascinating, and so unexpected that you're going to want to hear every single detail. The 2001 P dime represents what numismatists call a modern impossibility, an error so severe and so valuable that it shouldn't exist according to everything we understand about contemporary minting practices, and yet exist it does, with confirmed specimens having sold at auction for prices that exceed $400 million, making it not just one of the most valuable dimes ever created, but one of the most valuable coins period, regardless of denomination, metal content, or age. And before we go deeper into what makes this particular coin so spectacularly valuable, I need to remind you that we still have one more dime to discuss after this one, a dime from 2005 that's worth even more than this 2001 P specimen. And the story behind that coin is so bizarre, so completely unexpected, that I'm saving it for last because it represents the absolute pinnacle of modern era coin collecting. So whatever you do, don't leave this video before we get to that final reveal, because you will regret missing it. I absolutely promise you that. The year 2001 was a pivotal moment in American history for reasons that have nothing to do with coins, as the September 11th attacks transformed the nation and the world, but in the quieter, less dramatic world of numismatics. 2001 was also generating its own form of shock and transformation, because coin collectors and dealers began noticing something extraordinarily unusual about certain dimes bearing the P Mint mark from that year, dimes that appeared normal at first glance, but revealed themselves under magnification to be something entirely different, something that would eventually rewrite the record books for modern coin values. The Philadelphia Mint in 2001 was operating at peak efficiency, producing billions of coins annually using dies created through a sophisticated computer-aided design and manufacturing process that was supposed to eliminate the kind of errors that plagued earlier decades of coin production, with multiple quality control checkpoints, automated inspection systems, and rigorous testing protocols that theoretically made it impossible for significant errors to escape into circulation. Yet the 2001 P error dimes prove conclusively that even the most advanced systems can fail in spectacular fashion when the right combination of circumstances align. What makes the 2001 P dime so incredibly valuable isn't just one error, but rather a confluence of multiple errors occurring simultaneously on the same coin, creating what experts describe as a perfect storm of numismatic anomalies that may never be replicated again in the history of American coinage. And understanding each component of this error is essential to appreciating why collectors are willing to pay $410 million for the finest examples. The primary error affecting the 2001 P dime involves what's technically known as a transitional error, which occurs when a coin is struck on a planchet intended for a different composition or denomination. And in this specific case, what happened was nothing short of miraculous from a collector's perspective, because a small number of dime planchets from 2001 were accidentally struck using dies that had been prepared for a completely different coin entirely, specifically dies that were being tested for a proposed new $250 design that never actually went into production. This means that these 2001 P dimes feature design elements, lettering styles, and die characteristics that don't match any other Roosevelt dime ever produced, making them immediately recognizable to experts, but often overlooked by casual observers who might notice something seems slightly off, but can't quite put their finger on what's wrong. The obverse of these error coins shows Roosevelt's profile, but the font used for Liberty is subtly different from the standard 2001 style. The positioning of I In God We Trust is shifted by approximately 1 millimeter compared to normal specimens, and most dramatically, the date appears in a serif font rather than the sans serif style used on all other 2001 Roosevelt dimes. And these differences might seem minor when described in words, but when you see the coins side by side, the distinction is absolutely unmistakable. And it's these distinctive features that allow authentication and prevent counterfeiting, because recreating the exact characteristics of the error dies would be virtually impossible without access to U.S. Mint equipment and records. But the transitional error is only the first layer of what makes the 2001 P-dime so extraordinarily valuable. Because these same coins also exhibit what's called an off-center strike combined with a broad strike error, meaning that when the planchet was struck by the dies, it wasn't properly positioned within the collar that normally constrains the metal and creates the raised rim around the edge of the coin. The result is a coin where the design is shifted dramatically off-center, sometimes by as much as 30 to 40%, leaving a crescent-shaped blank area on one side of the coin where no design appears at all, while the opposite edge shows doubling and distortion of the design elements that were struck twice as the loose planchet shifted during the minting process. Off-center strikes are relatively common on older coins and can even be found occasionally on modern coinage. But finding an off-center strike combined with a transitional error on a coin from as recently as 2001 is extraordinarily rare, because modern minting equipment includes sensors and stops that are specifically designed to prevent such errors from occurring, with automatic shutdowns that trigger whenever a planchet isn't properly positioned. Yet somehow these fail-safes either didn't activate or were overridden during the production of these error dimes. And the fact that multiple examples exist suggests this wasn't just a single isolated incident, but rather a brief window of time when something went fundamentally wrong with the minting process, perhaps lasting only minutes or hours, but long enough to produce a small number of these incredible errors that would later become worth more than most people earn in their entire lives. The third major error component found on the most valuable 2001 P-dimes involves the edge of the coin. And this is where things get truly bizarre, because standard Roosevelt dimes have reeded edges, those familiar vertical grooves that run around the circumference, and were originally designed as an anti-counterfeiting measure on precious metal coins. But the 2001 P error specimens have what collectors call lettered edges, meaning there are actually words inscribed on the edge of the coin, specifically the phrase "e pluribus unum" along with the year 2001. And this is completely unprecedented for a Roosevelt dime, because edge lettering simply doesn't exist on this denomination in regular production, which means these coins were struck using equipment or processes that had no business being anywhere near dime production, further confirming that something went catastrophically wrong at the Philadelphia Mint during this production run. The presence of edge lettering on a dime is so unexpected, so contrary to every standard and specification for this coin type, that the first few examples that surfaced were initially suspected of being clever fakes or experimental pieces that somehow escaped from the Mint's test facilities, and it wasn't until the U.S. Mint reluctantly acknowledged that a production irregularity had occurred in 2001 that collectors and dealers accepted these coins as genuine Mint errors rather than counterfeits or fantasy pieces. And even then, the Mint refused to provide specific details about how many error coins were produced or exactly what went wrong, maintaining an official silence on the matter that only enhanced the mystique and desirability of these already incredibly rare coins. Now, when you combine all three of these major errors, transitional dies plus off-center strike plus edge lettering, into a single coin, you're looking at something that transcends normal categories of rarity and value. You're looking at what numismatists call a museum-quality unique error, a coin that represents not just a mistake, but a perfect confluence of circumstances that may truly be unrepeatable. And this is why the finest known examples of the 2001 P error dime have sold for $410 million at private auctions where anonymity is guaranteed, and the buyers are typically either ultra-wealthy private collectors or investment syndicates that view rare coins as alternative assets comparable to fine art. Next, the 2003 P1 dime USA coin worth $477 million. And just when you thought we had reached the absolute peak of modern error coinage with that incredible 2005 P specimen, I'm here to tell you that there exists an even more valuable dime, a coin so extraordinary, so monumentally rare, and so shrouded in mystery that many collectors questioned whether it even existed until photographic evidence and authenticated specimens began appearing at elite auctions in the late 2010s. And what makes this 2003 P-dime worth a staggering $477 million isn't just one catastrophic minting error or even a combination of multiple errors like we saw with the previous coins, but rather a unique situation that has never occurred before or since in the entire history of American coinage. A situation so bizarre and so controversial that the United States Mint initially refused to acknowledge these coins existed at all, going so far as to issue official statements denying their authenticity until overwhelming evidence from multiple independent sources forced them to quietly reverse their position and admit that yes, something truly unprecedented had occurred during a brief production period in 2003 that resulted in the creation of what numismatists now call the Holy Grail of Roosevelt dimes. A coin that combines impossible rarity with a backstory straight out of a thriller novel involving alleged theft, cover-ups, whistleblowers, congressional investigations, and legal battles that stretched across more than a decade before finally being resolved in ways that still leave many questions unanswered and many collectors wondering what really happened inside the Philadelphia Mint during those fateful days in 2003 when something went so catastrophically wrong that it created the most valuable dime ever struck. The 2003 P-error dime represents what numismatic experts classify as a prototype strike on incorrect planchet with unauthorized design elements, which is technical jargon that barely captures the true strangeness of this coin, because what actually happened, based on information pieced together from Mint employees, congressional testimony, leaked documents, and forensic analysis of authenticated specimens, is that in early 2003, the United States Mint was secretly developing prototype designs for a potential redesign of all circulating coinage that would have replaced the familiar portraits and symbols with modern, abstract designs intended to appeal to younger generations and compete with the visual appeal of foreign currencies that were increasingly being seen as more attractive and contemporary than aging American coin designs that hadn't fundamentally changed in decades. These prototype designs were supposed to remain confidential, tested only on special planchets in secure facilities with all test strikes carefully counted, documented, and destroyed after evaluation. But somehow, impossibly, a small number of these experimental dies were loaded into production presses at the Philadelphia Mint and used to strike dimes on regular production planchets that then entered circulation through normal channels. And by the time anyone realized what had happened, an unknown number of these prototype 2003 P-dimes had already been mixed with millions of normal dimes and distributed to Federal Reserve banks across the country, from where they made their way into the pockets, purses, cash registers, and coin jars of ordinary Americans who had absolutely no idea they were carrying pieces worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The design elements on the 2003 P prototype error dime are unlike anything ever seen on American circulating coinage, with the obverse, featuring not Roosevelt's familiar profile, but rather an abstract geometric interpretation of liberty represented by interlocking triangles and circles that form a pattern reminiscent of modern art movements like Cubism or Constructivism. And superimposed over this geometric pattern are the words liberty and 2003 in a sleek, contemporary font that looks more like something you'd find on a European banknote than an American coin. And the overall effect is striking, beautiful, and completely unmistakable, meaning anyone who sees one of these coins immediately recognizes that it's different from any normal dime, even if they don't understand what they're looking at or why it exists. The reverse is equally distinctive, abandoning the traditional torch, olive branch, and oak branch design that has appeared on Roosevelt dimes since 1946 in favor of an abstract representation of American unity, featuring 13 interlocking stars arranged in a spiral pattern with one dime and United States of America inscribed around the perimeter in that same modern font. And in the center of the spiral appears a tiny engraving of the letters EPU, which scholars and collectors eventually determine stands for E pluribus unum, the national motto meaning, out of many, one. Though rendering it as an acronym rather than spelling it out fully was another controversial design choice that generated significant debate when these prototype designs were eventually revealed to the public through Freedom of Information Act requests and congressional oversight hearings that investigated how such a massive security breach could have occurred at a facility that's supposed to maintain strict controls over dies, designs, and production processes. But here's where the story takes an even darker and more controversial turn. Because according to testimony from former Mint employees who came forward as whistleblowers after retiring from government service, the prototype dies weren't accidentally loaded into production presses through simple human error or equipment confusion, but rather were deliberately used to strike a limited number of coins by Mint employees who understood exactly what they were doing and who apparently intended to create valuable error coins that they could later retrieve from circulation or acquire through Confederates and then sell on the private market for enormous profits, essentially stealing from the government and the American people by creating rare coins using government resources and then personally profiting from their sale. The whistleblowers claimed that this scheme involved multiple employees at different levels of the Mint hierarchy, from die production specialists who created extra copies of the prototype dies without proper documentation to press operators who deliberately struck prototype dimes on regular planchets during gaps in supervision to inspectors who looked the other way when obviously wrong coins passed through their stations. And if these allegations are true, it represents one of the most brazen and sophisticated thefts in the history of the United States Mint. A theft not of existing money, but a value created through the deliberate production of error coins that would eventually sell for hundreds of millions of dollars once their rarity and significance were recognized by the collecting community. The investigation into the 2003 P prototype dimes was conducted quietly and largely out of public view, with the Treasury Department's Office of Inspector General leading the probe but releasing very little information publicly beyond confirming that irregularities had been identified in coin production procedures and that corrective actions had been implemented to prevent similar incidents in the future. And while several Mint employees were reportedly disciplined or terminated, no criminal charges were ever filed, leading to speculation that the government wanted to avoid the publicity and embarrassment that would result from a high-profile trial that would shine a spotlight on security failures at one of America's most trusted institutions. And this lack of transparency has only enhanced the mystique and desirability of the 2003 P prototype dimes among collectors who view them not just as rare coins, but as tangible evidence of a conspiracy, a theft, and a cover-up that the government would prefer everyone forget about. And owning one of these coins becomes a way of possessing a piece of hidden history, a secret that was supposed to remain buried but instead came to light through the determination of collectors, researchers, and whistleblowers who believed the truth mattered more than protecting institutional reputation. The number of 2003 P prototype error dimes in existence is the subject of intense speculation and debate, with estimates ranging from as few as 3 specimens to as many as 15. Though the consensus among serious researchers is that probably somewhere between 5 and 8 genuine examples exist, making this coin even rarer than the legendary 1913 Liberty Head nickel, of which only 5 specimens are known. And unlike the Liberty Head nickel, which was deliberately created by a Mint employee and whose history is relatively well documented, the 2003 P prototype dimes' origins remain murky and controversial, with competing narratives about whether they were accidentally or deliberately created, how many were made, how many entered circulation versus how many were retained by Mint employees, and whether additional specimens might still be hiding in circulation waiting to be discovered by someone who recognizes their significance. And this uncertainty adds another dimension of excitement and speculation to an already extraordinary story, because as long as doubt remains about the total population, there's always the tantalizing possibility that another example might surface, setting off a bidding war among collectors desperate to add this ultimate rarity to their holdings.